I never imagined it would be like this. I knew we were heading from bad to worse, that the arguments were becoming more frequent, and the words that once were exchanged with affection were now nothing but sharp weapons that hurt us more each day. But when I heard those words, "I'm leaving tonight," a part of me didn't feel pain. I already knew this moment would come, and maybe that's what scared me the most. The indifference. I no longer cared, and that terrified me. For the last few months, the only thing that had kept me in the marriage was the fear of losing the idea of family, of stability. But the truth was, I had lost all of that long before. I was living a lie, and he, more than anyone, could feel it. When he said he was leaving, a sense of relief washed over me. I took a deep breath, as if finally seeing the light after being trapped in a dark tunnel. I no longer loved him. I didn't even love myself. But what scared me the most was what this meant for the future. And somewhere inside me, a voice whispered, "Now is your chance to change." I didn't feel guilty, and I know many people would think I should. But the truth is, I was already with another man. I had already made the choice to move on, to look for something new, something that would make me feel alive again. The love I thought I had lived with him was already lost. And as I looked toward the future, the only thing left was the fear of truly making the wrong decision. Was I opening myself up to a new beginning by accepting his departure, or was I simply running from the pain of the end? The answer to that question was not clear, but something inside me knew that, somehow, from that night onward, everything would change. If you're curious to find out what happens next, keep watching. Don't miss the unfolding of this story. The silence between us was so heavy that, when he finally spoke, it felt like the entire house had exhaled. "I'm leaving tonight." I almost couldn't process those words. But at the same time, they sounded like something already expected, something I had known would happen. I just never imagined it would be so simple. He said it as if he was already decided, as if I no longer held any weight in his life. And in a way, I didn't. I didn't care anymore. I hadn't cared for a while. When he said that, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. In fact, what I felt was a relief that took me by surprise. I thought I would fall apart, but instead, I felt something snap inside me. It was like I had finally been freed from a prison I had built myself. Freedom never feels so real until you experience it, and there I was, breathing something I hadn't known in so long. My own independence. He stood up and started packing his things. I didn't stop him. He looked at me as if expecting me to react, to scream, maybe even beg him to stay. But I didn't do any of that. I just stayed there, looking at him, without feeling an ounce of affection. I didn't feel anything really, just an emptiness. It happened too fast, like everything that happens when the end has already been rehearsed. The idea that something could be saved was so distant, so irrelevant, that it didn't even seem necessary anymore. I should have felt something stronger, maybe a deep sorrow, but all I felt was the relief of knowing the choice was no longer in my hands. The responsibility for our failed relationship was now, in some way, in his hands. I wasn't willing to fight for something that no longer existed. I knew, deep down, that he didn't want it either. Our gazes had become so empty, so distant, that even words seemed meaningless. I no longer needed him around. He wasn't the man I had fallen in love with, and I, the woman he said he loved, no longer existed there. And the truth is, I knew this decision was better for both of us. He got ready, grabbed his last suitcase, and, without another word, left. He shut the door behind him. And at that moment, the silence was more deafening than any argument or discussion we had had in the past few months. The sound of the door closing reminded me that, finally, I was free. But freedom, at first, is confusing. You don't know what to do with it. I stayed there, in the middle of the room, like a stranger in my own home. The walls, once part of a shared life, now stared at me with a disconcerting gaze. What would I do with all this now? It was hard to breathe without feeling like something was missing, like the weight of his absence still lingered in the air, like a shadow. And then, I realized something I never thought would happen. I already had someone in mind. What I feared the most, what tormented me, had become the simplest truth. I was already with another man. And somehow, what seemed like an escape now became a prison in a more complex way. I knew what I was doing was wrong. I shouldn't have been with someone else while the other was still walking out the door. But the pain was so great that I couldn't tell where reason began and where running away ended. I was so emotionally drained that, when he approached me, something inside me saw a chance to start over. He was the novelty. He was the feeling that, at least for a moment, I would be desired again. And that made me feel alive. And I no longer knew if that was enough to fill the void his absence had caused, but I gave myself to it without thinking. Something inside me just wanted to get out of that place, out of that emotional space. I wanted to forget everything that held me back. But as time passed, I realized that this new relationship wasn't the answer. It was just a desperate attempt to fill a pain that would never go away until I faced my own loneliness. I know many might look at what I'm doing and judge me. But who am I to question my choices when all I wanted was to find some peace in the midst of the confusion? Who hasn't found themselves lost, trying to find a way, even knowing it might be the wrong one? Maybe you found yourself at a moment where the decisions we make seem like the only ones that make sense, even when they aren't. I didn't know if I was running towards something or away from something. But now, all I know is that, at the end of the day, the decision we make defines us in some way. And maybe, in the end, it wasn't the wrong decision, but what we did with it that really mattered. And you, what would you do if you were in my place? Comment below and share your thoughts. I'd really like to know what you would do in this situation. I think everyone has something to say about this. Maybe, in the end, we can learn something from each other's choices. I knew I was risking losing everything, even with him out of the house, and with the feeling of freedom invading my thoughts. Something inside me told me that this wasn't what I wanted. I was with another man, yes, but the emptiness it caused was uncontrollable. I was in a new relationship, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was fooling myself. I was trying to deceive myself, believing that this new chance, this new beginning, would erase everything I had lived up to that point. But the truth was, I didn't know who I was anymore. I was so lost in the middle of this emotional confusion that, instead of finding a solution, I found myself further and further from who I truly wanted to be. He was there, by my side, giving me affection, attention, everything I desired at that moment. But somewhere deep inside me, something was broken. I was so involved in this new romance, but I couldn't feel that it was filling the emptiness inside of me. He made me feel desired, but was that enough? I was seeking something beyond what he could offer me. It was as if I was trying to erase the past and write a new story, but the words just didn't fit. I couldn't stop thinking about what I had lost. I couldn't stop imagining what might have been if things had been different. If I had made other choices, if I had fought for the marriage, if I hadn't given myself to this relentless search for something that would make me feel alive again. Was what I was living now really what I wanted? Or was it just an escape from the pain I couldn't face anymore? Every day that passed seemed to pull me further from an answer. I found myself in an internal battle between the desire to continue living this new romance and the guilt of putting everything I had already lived in the background. I tried to convince myself that I was making the right choice. My husband had already left, and with him, all the memories of a relationship that no longer existed. What was left was this new chance, an opportunity to finally be happy again. But at the same time, I knew it wouldn't be that easy. I didn't want to deal with the complications of the past anymore, with the regrets that came up every time I closed my eyes. I was tired of carrying all of this inside of me. But at the same time, I didn't know how to free myself. I was with another man, yes, but my heart was still tied to something I couldn't understand. Something that wouldn't let me truly move on. Every moment I spent with him seemed to push me further away from the person I wanted to be. The fear of not being able to resolve this internal confusion haunted me, but I didn't know what to do anymore. I just wanted to be sure I was making the right decision, that I was doing what was best for me. I didn't know if I was running away from the pain of the past, or if I was truly seeking something new, but as the days went by, the doubt grew. I needed answers. I needed to understand what I really wanted for my life. Only then did I realize that the only person who could give me that answer was myself. And that was what I was afraid to face. The fear of discovering that, maybe, I didn't know what I truly wanted. Or worse, that I already knew and was running from it. But somewhere inside me, I knew I had to deal with all of this. I couldn't keep postponing the truth. As hard as it was, I knew I had to look within myself and face reality. The fear of discovering that I was stuck in a cycle of wrong choices paralyzed me. But more than that, the fear of losing the opportunity to finally find peace gave me strength. And while all of this was happening, I kept asking myself, what would you do if you were in my place? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I really want to know how you would face this situation. Maybe I'll find an answer in your words. I thought I was finally starting to get things under control, but the reality hit me harder than I expected. I was pretending to have everything figured out, but deep down, I knew I was just running from the truth. The new man in my life seemed to be the answer to my loneliness, to the emptiness I'd been carrying for so long, but it was clear that he wasn't the one who could fill the void. I was so focused on escaping the pain of my failed marriage that I had forgotten one crucial thing. I had never truly faced my own emotions. I had buried everything so deep inside that I didn't even know how to confront it. When I was alone, the silence became unbearable. There were moments when I couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I felt like a stranger in my own skin, someone completely disconnected from who I used to be. It was like I had traded my identity for a temporary distraction, and now I was stuck in this in-between place, too afraid to face what was behind me and too uncertain to embrace what lay ahead. I couldn't ignore the guilt that gnawed at me every time I thought about my husband, even though he was the one who left. Part of me wanted to reach out to him, to try and fix the wreckage we had created, but another part of me was terrified of the idea of confronting that mess. How could I even begin to repair what had been so broken? The new man, the one who had become my escape, began to feel less like a solution and more like an echo of the problems I hadn't dealt with. I had convinced myself that this was a fresh start, but it wasn't. It wasn't even close. The truth was, I had been using him to mask the pain I didn't want to feel. And it wasn't fair to him. He deserved someone who was truly present, someone who wasn't carrying the baggage of a marriage that had died long before the divorce papers were signed. But I couldn't stop myself. I was desperate for something to fill the emptiness, something to make me feel whole again. As the days passed, I found myself increasingly torn between the life I had walked away from and the one I was trying to create. I missed the stability, the comfort of knowing what was coming next. Yes, my marriage had been falling apart, but there was a part of me that still longed for what we had before it all crumbled. It wasn't about him or me, really. It was about the life we had built together, the memories of better days that I couldn't let go of. It wasn't easy to admit, but I realized I wasn't ready to let go of everything. Maybe I wasn't ready to move on at all. I tried to fill the void with new experiences, with new people, but nothing worked. There was always something missing. I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was, but I knew that I wasn't truly living. I was simply existing, surviving, not thriving. Every time I smiled, every time I laughed, it felt like a mask, like I was pretending to be okay when inside, I was completely broken. And the worst part? I couldn't even admit it to myself. I kept telling myself that I was doing fine, that everything would work itself out eventually. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was lost. Completely and utterly lost. The man I had been with didn't deserve this version of me. I didn't deserve him either. I needed to find myself before I could give anything to anyone else. But how could I do that when I didn't even know where to start? I had to face the reality of my emotions, no matter how painful that would be. And that scared me more than anything. The fear of what I might discover about myself. The fear of confronting the parts of me I had buried for so long. It was overwhelming. But I knew that if I wanted to move forward, I had no choice but to take a step back and look at everything that had led me to this point. Only then could I understand who I really was and what I truly wanted. The days blurred together, each one indistinguishable from the next. I thought that maybe time would heal the wounds, that I'd wake up one morning feeling better, feeling more at peace with everything that had happened. But the truth was, time only deepened the questions that gnawed at me. I couldn't stop asking myself, was I doing the right thing? Was moving on really what I needed, or was I just avoiding the reality of what I had left behind? The relationship I was in now, the man who was there with me, was kind, attentive, everything I had told myself I needed. And yet, every time I looked at him, I couldn't help but feel the weight of my own indecision. There was no joy in our time together. It was just a distraction, a way to fill the silence and the void that I was too afraid to face. I knew he deserved someone who wasn't as torn, someone who could love him completely, without holding back, without being haunted by the ghosts of the past. But there I was, caught in a limbo I couldn't escape. The moment I had hoped would be a fresh start was instead a mirror reflecting all the unresolved pain I was trying to outrun. I wanted to believe in this new beginning, to believe that I could let go of everything that no longer served me. But every time I tried to move forward, I found myself looking back, questioning my choices, wondering if this was really what I wanted, or if I had just been too afraid to confront the truth. And then, there were the moments when I'd remember my husband, the life we had built together. I had convinced myself that I no longer missed him, that I was better off without him. But when those memories crept in, they didn't come with anger or resentment. They came with a deep, aching longing. A reminder of the love we once shared, the hope we once had for our future. I couldn't deny it any longer. I wasn't ready to let go of that life. Not yet. I wasn't ready to accept that it was truly over. I told myself that moving on was the right thing to do, that I needed to start fresh, to stop looking back. But deep inside, I knew that I couldn't truly move forward until I faced what I had left behind. The truth was, I had never really let go. And the fear of that truth, the fear of realizing that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as strong as I had convinced myself to be, paralyzed me. I had hoped that this new relationship would be the answer, that it would fill the emptiness and make everything feel right again. But as the days went by, it became clear that nothing would ever be the same. I wasn't the same person anymore. The woman I was when I first met him, when I was still married, was gone. I had changed, and I wasn't sure if I could ever go back to the person I used to be. It was a painful realization, one that I wasn't ready to face, but I knew I had to. I had to let go of the past and stop running from the truth. I had to stop pretending that I could find happiness in something new when I was still carrying the weight of everything that had come before. And yet, as much as I knew this, I still found myself trapped. Trapped in a cycle of doubt, of indecision, of fear. I had built a new life, but it was a fragile one. A life that was held together by the hope that things would get better, that the pain would eventually fade. But with every passing day, it became harder to believe that. And the more I tried to convince myself that everything was okay, the more I realized how far from okay I really was. How much I had been ignoring the reality of my situation. It wasn't just about the man I was with now, it was about me. About who I had become in the process of trying to escape my own pain. I wasn't happy, I wasn't whole. I was just surviving. And I didn't want to survive anymore. I wanted to live. I wanted to find peace, to find my way back to who I truly was, to stop running from my emotions and face them head on. But how could I do that when I was so terrified of what I might find? How could I face the truth when it seemed like the last thing I wanted to see? The truth about who I had become, the truth about what I had lost, and the truth about the future I wasn't sure I was ready to face. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't keep living in this state of confusion. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when deep down, I knew it wasn't. I needed to stop running, stop hiding behind distractions, and start confronting the mess I had created. Only then would I be able to move forward, to truly heal. But would I be able to face the truth? Would I be strong enough to confront the pain that had been building up inside of me for so long? I didn't know, but I knew I had no other choice. As I sat there, contemplating everything that had happened, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. The weight of my decisions, the consequences of my actions, it was all starting to hit me. I had been running for so long, pretending that I could just move on, that I could find happiness in something new, but now I was confronted with the undeniable truth. I wasn't ready to move on. I had spent so much time convincing myself that I could erase the past, that I could start over, and never look back. But deep down, I knew that I had to confront everything I had buried inside if I ever hoped to heal. I wasn't just dealing with the loss of my marriage, I was dealing with the loss of myself. The woman I used to be, the woman who once believed in love, in forever, was gone. And in her place was a stranger, someone who didn't know how to cope with the mess I had created. I had put up so many walls around myself, trying to protect the fragile parts of my heart, but those walls had only made me more isolated. I had been so focused on running away from the pain, on finding a quick fix, that I had completely lost sight of who I was. I had allowed myself to get lost in the chaos, to get swept up in the idea of starting over without realizing that I needed to first address the hurt that had been festering inside me. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I wasn't so sure. Every time I looked at the man I was with, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was cheating both him and myself. He didn't deserve someone who was still so broken, still so tangled in the past. And I didn't deserve him either. I couldn't love him the way he deserved to be loved, not when I wasn't even sure I loved myself anymore. My mind kept going back to my husband, to the life we had shared, to the love we once had. It wasn't perfect, no relationship ever is, but it was real. And in some strange way, I still missed him. I missed the person I used to be with him. I missed the comfort of being in a relationship where, despite the flaws and mistakes, we were still trying to make it work. The thought of that life, of that version of myself, made me ache with a sense of longing, but also with a sense of regret. What had I done? What had I thrown away in the heat of a moment, in the desperation to escape the pain that had built up for so long? I had left, I had moved on, and now I was faced with the consequences of that decision. But did I even want to go back? Was going back even possible? Could I ever go back to who I was before everything fell apart? Could I ever be that person again? These questions swirled in my mind, and I couldn't find an answer. Part of me wanted to reach out to my husband, to apologize, to try and fix what had been broken, but I knew it wasn't that simple. The damage had been done, and even if we tried to go back, we would never be the same. I would never be the same. But I wasn't sure if I was ready to let go of that possibility, to accept that some things are simply beyond repair. The weight of that realization was heavier than anything I had felt before. I wanted to move forward, to let go of the past and finally find peace, but I was so afraid of what I might uncover. If I let go of the past, if I accepted that it was over, what would that mean for me? What would that mean for my future? I felt stuck in a cycle of doubt, regret, and fear. I couldn't move forward, but I couldn't go back either. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that maybe that was the problem all along. I wasn't allowing myself to grieve, to feel the pain of everything that had happened. I wasn't letting myself process what I had lost. Instead, I was trying to run from it, to bury it, to replace it with something new. But no matter how many distractions I found, no matter how many new experiences I threw myself into, nothing would ever fill the void until I confronted my own pain. It wasn't about moving on or starting over. It was about healing. It was about finding peace with what had happened, with who I had become, and with what I still needed to let go of. But how could I do that when I was still so afraid of facing the truth? How could I heal when I was still running from my own emotions, from the wreckage of my past? I had to face it, I knew that. I had to allow myself to feel everything, even the things that terrified me. But I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to face it, if I was brave enough to let go of the past and finally move forward, or if I would continue to live in this limbo, stuck between what was and what could never be again. It was a terrifying thought. But as I sat there, in the quiet of my own mind, I knew that the only way to move forward was to confront the truth, no matter how difficult it would be. And that was the hardest part. I was exhausted. Every day felt like a battle I couldn't win. I was standing at the edge of something, unsure whether to step forward or retreat back into the comfort of my past. I was so torn, so conflicted, that I wasn't sure what I wanted anymore. One part of me screamed to keep moving forward, to embrace the new life I had started, while another part of me clung to the past, to the life that I had once known. But the more I tried to separate myself from everything that had come before, the more I realized that I couldn't escape it. The past was a part of me, and no matter how far I ran, it would always be with me. I couldn't keep running. I had to face it, but facing it meant confronting the pain I had spent so long avoiding. And the fear of that pain was overwhelming. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the life I had been living, this version of me that was constantly trying to outrun the truth, wasn't real. It was a facade. I wasn't truly living. I was simply surviving, putting one foot in front of the other without ever stopping to think about where I was going. I had to stop pretending that everything was fine, that I had everything under control. Because I didn't. I had allowed myself to get lost in this new version of my life, to get distracted by the idea of moving on, when deep down, I knew that I hadn't truly let go of the past. I was carrying it with me, every step of the way, like a heavy burden on my heart. And the more I tried to deny it, the more it consumed me. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew what I didn't want anymore. I didn't want to live in fear, in doubt, in this constant state of emotional confusion. I didn't want to keep pretending that I could outrun the truth. I had to find peace. I had to find a way to heal. But how? How could I heal when I didn't even know where to start? The answer, I realized, was simple. I had to face myself. I had to face the pain, the heartbreak, and the regret. I had to allow myself to feel everything that I had been running from for so long. I had to allow myself to grieve, to mourn the loss of what had been, to mourn the person I used to be, the person I had lost in the chaos of it all. It wasn't going to be easy. In fact, it was going to be one of the hardest things I would ever do. But I knew it was the only way to move forward, to finally let go of the past and embrace whatever future was waiting for me. I had to give myself permission to heal, to be vulnerable, and to stop hiding behind the walls I had built around myself. It was time to stop running. It was time to face the truth. But in that moment, as I thought about everything I had been through, I couldn't help but feel a sense of connection to others who might be going through the same thing. To those who had been through heartbreak, through pain, through loss. I wasn't alone. And neither are you. If you've ever felt lost, if you've ever been caught in the middle of a storm, just know that your story matters. Your pain matters. Your healing matters. I want to hear your story, because together, we can keep these memories alive. We can give voice to the ones who have suffered and remind each other that we are not defined by our pasts. We are defined by our strength, our ability to rise, and our capacity to heal. If you've been touched by this story, if you understand what it's like to be caught in the struggle of moving forward, I invite you to join this community. Subscribe to this channel so we can continue sharing these important stories. Let's keep the conversation going. Let's preserve the memories and voices that deserve to be heard. And don't forget to leave a comment. Tell me how you've navigated your own journey of healing. Share your thoughts, your experiences. We are all in this together. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of transformation, of hope, of struggle, be sure to check out our playlist. The link will be in the description or in the pinned comments. Let's keep these stories alive and let them remind us all that even in the darkest moments, there is always hope.